What's up, everybody? A Sparrow with a Gun here from Sleepless Nights with another episode on the Space Engineers Dissection series, which is probably, it's a very strong possibility it's going to be named to the Space Re-Engineers series. I'm not entirely sure on that yet, but I'm thinking that's what I'm going to end up probably going with, but I don't know. So we're back on the CH Pharos cargo hauler, which you can see here. So yeah, I was actually a little bit surprised that everybody picked this one. I was really thinking everybody would go for the Archimedes. However, then when I looked at it and I remembered it had all the different hull panels, and I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So let's go ahead and dive right in and start tearing this ship apart. Alright, so first up, you can, I'm going to be doing, like I said in the last episode, I'm probably going to be mixing up the series a little bit for the next few episodes and just trying different things and seeing what everybody likes the most. I'm probably going to delve a little bit deeper this episode than I did the last time. I focused a lot more on building techniques. I think this one will be a little bit more of actually tearing the thing apart and really looking at the guts, I think. Not quite sure yet, but we're gonna test it out. So let me know if you like this style better in the comments of this video. But one of the biggest things, there's two really big things that I noticed about this ship right off the top. One, it uses a lot of the greeble style. Again, my new favorite word. There's actually a word to describe the thing I always liked. But it uses a lot of it, and it's done in an interesting way. Typically, greebles are designed in stuff like this, where, for example, you've got a 1x1 wheel here that's not finished, rounded hull, a rotor without a rotor head, some columns here, an antenna. So it's kind of peppered in with stuff that you need, like the antennas, spotlights. I don't know if this one's finished. Yep, that laser antenna's done. So there are some functional blocks in here, but for the most part, it's junk. You know, it's just to add more surface detail. This looks like a timer block. Yep. So there's timer blocks, but you'll notice a lot of these on a lot of these ships are incomplete. They're just there for show. Or they're like this, which are basically just hull plating. They're not really for any kind of function. But one thing I noticed with this one that makes it very interesting is that it almost incorporates a greeble style detail design, but it uses functional blocks. For example, like I said, when we're flying out here, this looks like clutter. It's very cluttered on the inside with hull surrounding it, which looks cool. And then you come back over here, you got kind of the same types of patterns. We're looking at LCD panels, again another wheel, another rounded corner sphere, some more columns, just basically just random bits and bobs kind of thing, right? But then when we get in the actual core part of the ship, you'll notice that it's using a lot of conveyors to connect up to things that are actually part of the ship, such as the cargo hold, or cargo containers. I believe some of these also connect to hydrogen tanks, but I'm not 100% on that, and I don't see any in here to prove me right. We've got a gravity generator over here, we've got some lights. Oh, there's a hydrogen tank, but it's utilizing the conveyor tubes. Oh, I'm stuck. I need to figure out how to get out of here. It's utilizing the conveyor tubes in such a way that it kind of, from the outside, ends up looking greeble-esque. And I'm not sure... Okay, these are functioning, they're just off. I was going to say, I didn't know if those thrusters were there for show or not. But it all connects to things, which is a very interesting way to do surface detail, or not surface detail, but it's not really greebles at that point, because it actually does serve a purpose. So I would come back to my original term that I kind of coined of clutter detail, but it uses the actual functionality of the ship, which is very interesting. It's a very different way to do it. It also uses what looks like... I'm trying to figure out what this is concealing. Okay, so it's just catwalks over top of conveyor blocks to give it more flair and not make everything look like conveyors. I get it. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, one other example that's pretty neat about this ship is patterns. It looks very, very detailed, but if you look carefully, you start to kind of notice that the pattern tends to repeat. So for example, this isn't really a great example because this first section is a little different. Let's start with this one. So you can see we have a turret, 2 conveyors, a couple of thrusters, more conveyors, turrets on the outer conveyor here that kind of branches off from the central one, and it goes to these front and back conveyor tubes, which goes down, connects to the cargo containers, comes down, connects to thrusters, etc. But if you kind of pan back and look, it just repeats back and forth up until this section where it gets into the aft part of the ship. So that's an interesting way that you can make use of a pattern to elongate the ship. So for example, like this, if you just had the one pattern or the nose, you know, that's all there is. It would just be the... And even this looks like it's 2 of the same section, with the exception of it may be reversed. And the outer hull looks slightly different with the missiles instead of the connector, but the overall structure looks fairly similar. So I would hazard a guess and say that this is basically a flipped, but a similar ship, or I mean a similar section. It's a little different though, so maybe not exact. It may not be a 1-to-1, but it's clearly kind of starting with the same idea. But again, another example here of exposing the assemblers and their modules and extra thrusters and conveyor tubes and all that kind of stuff. There's some slight added detail here with just like the extra catwalks and things, but a lot of this is actually functional, which is something you don't see as often. Normally, when builders do greeble stuff, it's just clutter. It doesn't connect to anything, doesn't do anything. So this is an interesting way to tackle that by exposing the functional sections and essentially turning that into your clutter detail, or your greebles. Which is it's really kind of an interesting take on it. Now, the only thing I don't personally like about this style is it also exposes the functional parts of the ship to where if you were attacked, it would be easy to disable certain components of the ship because there's nothing really protecting it. I'm not particularly a fan of that, but again, this is a cargo ship, so if you were going through dangerous areas of space, you would think you were bringing an escort or something like that, and it wouldn't be an issue. So there is that element to it. But yeah, what I was meaning before though is if you look at these sections, if you were to cut this section off and just put the nose or one section in the nose, it would be a very small, smushed up kind of ship. But by extending it, by just copy and pasting different sections, it creates a much different shape, and in this case, a lot better. So that's an interesting aspect of this exterior parts of the ship. To me, it's the most eye-catching part. The contrast here is really cool. All of the detail work, all of the functional parts is all done in a dark charcoal color, and the outer hull is done in a lighter gray. It really, really works for contrast. It's really cool that when you just load up a screenshot of this ship, it immediately makes it look more detailed, just because you see a lot of depth. There's not only physical depth, because this is actually, you know, a different size. It's hollow, so there's a different kind of shape going on the inside, and this is more of an outer casing. But then just color-wise, it really draws you in. So that's a really cool idea for ship design, of kind of making certain detail parts look different than other sections, so it really draws your attention. And the added texture detail of having it very cluttered and then be a different color, it makes your eye really look at like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on in there, and it's very effective. It's really cool. It works really well. The other thing I really like on the exterior here is the hull itself. It's not particularly fancy, but it doesn't have to be. It's essentially a lot of circular shapes to match the outer hull. That's really the biggest thing. Or not to match the outer, to match the inner. sorry, you've got a lot of framing. It's basically a lot of framing going on, where you've got these ramps and things set in certain angles to create the right shapes. Ooh, I like this too. They basically it's basically putting a frame around everything, which is very effective, and I really think it works really well for this ship. You can see again here they put a frame that matches a pretty close shape to the thruster, and a different shape, but it leaves enough room for the landing gears and all that kind of stuff. But it's basically the outer hull turns into a frame instead of like some kind of protective casing. It's more to frame in all of the detail work. I do like adding the pillars here. It's not structurally necessary, obviously, but it does give that illusion of structural integrity where, it's holding everything together kind of thing. It's a nice little touch. This is a cool thing as well. It's subtle. It's very, very subtle, but very effective. They're using the 2x1 base armor slopes and basically just setting them up in a line, but it creates this kind of finned type texture, which it's really cool. It adds, again, it's just a little touch. It's subtle, but it adds a little bit of texture, and the change in color again kind of comes back to that contrast. So the hull itself is not all that complex. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's a lot of ramp usage, or slopes. I call them ramps because of the ramp mod was first before the vanilla actually got on board. But it's a lot of use of the ramps and slopes, and ooh, there's a half block set up here. I still need to get better with half blocks. I don't ever remember to use them, but they're very effective if used correctly. But it's a lot of circular shapes and curves to match the same. Again, it basically matches the outer hull, or I mean the inner contours, and frames it all in. So it's not particularly difficult per se. I mean, it's going to be time consuming to do it all, but it's not a difficult art concept. It's not like you have to master some building technique. It's mainly working with flipping ramps back and forth from each other to create inner and outer curves. But a lot of it is just to, again, it's just to kind of frame it in. I do like the use of the half blocks here. It gives it a lot more texture and depth than, say, something like if we were to remove these and just place single blocks. I'll show you the difference. Because it actually is one of those you wouldn't think it would make that big of a difference, but it does. This looks like it's all one piece now. So, actually, I want to try a little experiment. Again, we're going to play this episode a little bit different than the last one, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so I actually went through and removed all of the half blocks on the outer hull here along this line. I started to remove the half block slopes to, again, show the example of depth, but it didn't really end up doing exactly the kind of point I wanted to make, so I just kind of gave up on it. But there is a point to be had here of half blocks and how much they can add to the detail of something. So, but mainly let's focus on these right here, these frame bars. So when you do it this way, it looks like one long piece of hull, right? Like it's just one long frame that got thrown on top of the ship kind of thing. There's not as much depth or dimension to it. Now, if we look at this one over here, which I kept intact, you can tell the difference of, now it looks like each one of these is a section or a compartment or something like that. And again, the little slopes add that extra little indentation kind of thing. But the biggest thing here is the half block armor plates in between that gives it a lot more depth, really. I probably have used the word a bunch of times, but it's what it does. So I really do like that aspect of the outer hull section, in that they kept it kind of without doing anything fancy or using modded blocks or anything crazy, or even using a different color. It still gave it a lot more detail and texture to it. So another thing that I want to try out this episode is an actual dissection. So what I've done is I have this section of the ship over here, and I've actually cut it in half already. Now this one won't work 100% perfectly. Apparently there's a gun floating out here. Give me that. It won't work 100% perfectly because the actual ship, even though the hull and the inner guts and stuff are fine, as you can tell from the bridge layout here, it's a little bit asymmetrical in a couple of the rooms. So that won't really work 100%, but I wanted to cut it up a little bit because it was recommended in my last episode to go a little bit more into a deep dive and kind of actually look at how everything's kind of put together. So that's what we're going to do. I believe I might have actually cut out the hallway here of where you're actually supposed to access this room from, and it's probably right here, I imagine. So yeah, that's the thing. This ship didn't have as much of an interior as I expected, to be honest, but yeah. Oh, there's no I took out the gravity generator, that's why. Okay, and I don't remember where this goes exactly. This is another compartment area. Again, we see what we saw in the last episode. I hate mag boots so much. Of this kind of... It should probably just be dubbed a ramp hallway, because that's basically what it is. It's two base ramps, you know, flipped on their ends and put nose to nose kind of thing. And it kind of creates this, you know, this Imperial Star Destroyer, Death Star kind of a look, kind of design. So, and I cut it in half so you can't really see it, but it uses the same idea here. So it's a really cool design. It's really simple, and it adds a lot of life to your hallways and pathways without really having to do anything too fancy. You're not really having to, you know, do a large to small grid hybrid or anything like that. You kind of just throw ramps on the bottom and the top, and voila, you have a not ordinary hallway kind of thing. So that's a cool little trick. That's pretty effective. Now, unfortunately, with the way this got cut, there's a lot of the center points which were holding the ship together, like conveyor junctions and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of points that don't make as much sense when you cut it in half, because you're not really cutting the outer layer off. It's actually cutting it in half, and you lose that middle row. It may actually be smart of me to do another cut and maybe make it a little less centered and a little more off to the side, just so we open it up a little bit. But this does show one thing that I was trying to get across before, and that's patterns. You can see, again, the section ends right about here, but where all these two cargo containers, or 2x2 cargo containers, and their doors, and the thrusters, and it's all like a copy and paste, which can be used very effectively. And then we have the reactors and thrusters and all this stuff over here. And I don't recall... I think this is one of those where, because we cut out the hallway, there was a door here that let you kind of come out. And we've got some different things over here, like the thrusters are connected. One thing I do like about this ship is it seems like, obviously I cut half of it off, but it does seem like everything is connected. For example, these back thrusters way over here and these over here, they're all running through storage tanks, reactors, conveyors, junctions. Like, it's making use of a lot of different connection points to make sure everything's kind of able to talk to each other. Which is very effective, and it's really cool. It's something that you don't normally see a lot of, because it usually gets buried in a ship. This one, like I said, kind of exposes the functional parts of the ship, and so it's a little bit easier to identify some of it. I'm gonna try and do like a 3/4 cut and see what we come up with for that. So give me just a minute while I dice this ship up one more time. Okay, so we still lost a few things here and there, but I'm a little bit happier with how this came out, because there's still some other sections that we didn't get, we didn't remove. As you can see, like I said, we're still keeping the cargo containers and everything. This is basically what would happen if you shaved off the outer edge here. I went to about this point and took it off from that edge. So it leaves a little bit more of the other side of the ship, but from an exposed view. Once again, here's the hallway, cryo chamber, things that we cut off on the other side. So, like I said, you've got your tanks and everything that kind of connect all through the ship. There's tons of conveyor blocks everywhere. It looks like I missed a couple of cleanup items. Our jump drive is still functioning here. The catwalk's still here. So yeah, we got a lot better of a cut this time. Because you can kind of see a lot more of what's going on. Here's the, you know, airlock access point type of thing. But yeah, so it's an interesting design, because where most ships add their greeble or clutter detail with non-functioning blocks just to add something to look at, this one took more of an exposed view approach, where you basically just don't cover up all of the guts of the ship and let that actually be your detail work. And one other thing I wanted to point out once again is, since we actually have the hallway intact this time, so here's the entryway from the other side, and like I said, so here's another example of that ramp hallway. This was a little bit of an interesting ship design, though, because it didn't really have too much of an interior at all. As you can see here, you had a hallway that then led into an airlock, and you could just basically access the cargo containers, but there was no real floors or rooms or anything, per se. But yeah, so this is yet another example of what I was talking about, where it's not really particularly difficult to do this kind of build style with the hallway, but it does add a lot more than just putting, you know, square light armor blocks around each other and just calling it a day. You see it a little bit here. This is another example of what I mentioned in the last episode of that textured hallway, or alternating hallway. Hallway, I keep saying hallway. Ramp. It's an alternating ramp structure where you have the nose and the base, and then a base, and, you know, that kind of thing. So that's another example of that. I still cannot figure out why, for the life of me, why the medical room is upside down. Yeah, I can't figure that out. It just doesn't make sense. Because, the reason I say that, I'm going to break things. I mean, it is the dissection series. Because there's a conveyor on the bottom and the top. And if you look at a medical room, it has a conveyor both on the top and the bottom. So, I mean, it's dealer's choice when you're building your own ship. I just don't know what the reasoning behind why it wasn't done this way. I mean, I guess in theory, if you're really kind of like role-playing, you couldn't really fit through here, even though you actually can. I can't figure that out. I don't really know why that was done that way, but, you know, it's not my ship, so who knows. I'm sure there was a rhyme or a reason behind it. With that, though, I don't think there's too much else to go over. Like I said, it's interesting to me. I wasn't sure how I was going to tackle this series, to be honest. It was a suggestion that I thought was a good one, and as long as you guys are enjoying it, I'll keep doing them, especially if you're learning something or anything like that, or you're getting something out of it, not just, oh, that was cool, but if it's actually helping you guys build, then yeah, I'd absolutely keep doing it. But I do find it interesting. It almost reminds me of a magic trick, where something looks incredible, and then when you actually start picking it apart, you realize, oh, it's a lot of simple things put together to make something really spectacular. And this ship is a great example of that I'm actually running out of things to point out, because there aren't that many complex building methods put in here. There's not a lot of ramp tricks or rotor head switching or anything like that. It's some simple concepts like using the ramps for curves and then just applying them all over the place in different ways. You see it in the hull, you see it in the interior here. You know, we've got another inner ramp circle here. There's an interesting little shape going on up here, though. What is this? Okay, so this is, it looks like an extra thruster back here for reasons, I suppose. I guess that was just how they did it. I do kind of like this, though. It's a ramp base connected to a ramp, a 2x1 corner ramp, and then the thruster is put inset in between them. That's kind of cool. I like that. Especially on this kind of thing, if you were putting it on the top of the ship or something. That's a cool... It's like an elevated thruster, but it's still housed in something, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, I think this is a great example of taking a couple of really simple techniques, but then just applying them really well. I really do think that's a great example of it, because it works really well, but it's not all that fancy when you start breaking it apart. So let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments, or message me or anything like that. I'm working on a Discord server. I'm trying to make sure I get all my ducks in a row and add a bunch of different sections and rooms and stuff for everybody. But I hope to have that up in the coming month or so. Hopefully way before that, but I've gotten to where I give myself a lot of time because it takes me forever to do anything. So for now, you know, let me know in the comments or message me or something like that. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. Also, if you had any suggestions for how to improve the series, or things you'd rather see, or format, like the way that I do my these videos and stuff, if you'd like to see them done a different way, or have a suggestion, let me know. Because, like I said, this is kind of an evolving series at the moment. I don't really have anything set in stone as this is what I really want to do with it. It was a suggestion from one of my subscribers in the first place. It wasn't even really my idea. So yeah, I'm kind of just evolving with the series, so feel free to leave me suggestions or things that you liked about it or didn't like about it, and how you would think would be a good way to improve it. But we're going to wrap things up here for this episode. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, and I will see you all next time. Peace.